But I say Kyler Murray is still a top 10 quarterback.
As far as QBR?
Yeah. Well, according to QBR, he's only 12th, but I'm just saying the QBR is, one of those made up stats that's supposed to tell you how good a quarterback really is in regards to his team's winning percentage.
Yes.
But considering that Lamar Jackson's an 81.6, and then every other quarterback after that is a 76.6, is Patrick Mahomes in second, and everybody else is below that. I don't know how much I trust QBR. Basically, according to QBR, the quarterbacks suck this year.
Well, no.
Or just that Lamar and Mahomes are better than they're head and shoulders above most of them. Yeah.
Thank you, Nick.
Well, Dak Russell, Deshaun, and those guys are all in the 70s. Stafford, Wentz, Fitzpatrick, Breeze, and Cousins are in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's 10 quarterbacks in the 50s.
Okay, so understand that QBR 50 is average. So you definitely want to be 50 or better. 50 is not horribly bad. It's just average, period. Also remember that with all the metrics they put into QBR, it grades the quarterback for every single snap in the game where they have the ball in their hand making a play with it. So that means running with the ball or throwing the ball, not when they hand it off. So it takes to things like throwing an incomplete pass on 3rd and 8, which, doesn't really factor that much into the regular quarterback rating system we have because, 158.3 is perfect. And I look at some stats for games of quarterbacks who are perfect, and I'm like, how the hell did this work out? Where you're only talking about touchdown to interception ratio, completion percentage, and the number of yards thrown. And those can be grossly misleading as far as how well they played if you're only taking those stats without the context of how they performed based on those plays in which they acquired them. That's what QBR does. It takes into account every single play. If it was positive, cool. If it was negative, you get dinged for it. So, yeah, I like QBR a little bit better than the quarterback rating.
Yeah, and the one bias of QBR that at least is said by those in the analytics community is because it's looking at every play, it tends to favor quarterbacks with mobility a little bit more that do pick up some yards with their legs, so it's not surprising that Lamar's at the top. And, Mahomes doesn't run a ton, but he's actually had some big clutch runs on his dislocated knee a few times. And so Mitch Trubisky's always a little bit higher in the QBR too. But, yeah, in general, I think that sounds about right, that the Garoppolo is – I think he's maybe the top of that middle tier of quarterbacks who's, he's like Alex Smith at his best sort of thing, or, something like the good Andy Dalton season. I think that's kind of where we're talking about him at.
It's pretty funny because I know how low you are on Alex Smith, and Alex Smith is a top 10 quarterback too.
I'm not low on him. I was always like, he's like the 12th or 13th or something there. And that guy doesn't win you Super Bowls.
I should mention that while I am taking the 49ers in the upset, I do expect an extremely close, entertaining football game. This is going to be a good one. This is definitely a must watch. This is must see TV at 1:00 on Sunday afternoon. You guys are both taking the Saints, you guys are both taking the Saints, and honestly, I can't say the Saints aren't going to win.
I'm taking the Saints because I don't expect them to lose. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, the line is the Saints -2.5. So it's in New Orleans. So if this was a neutral site game, the Niners would be favored by 0.5 point in theory. But and again, we've talked a lot about Jimmy G. I don't like reductive matchup conversations where you only talk about, it's this quarterback versus this quarterback. That's not the way football actually works. But I think in this case it kind of is, just because these are two teams that are very good across the board. It's almost like if you're looking at your fantasy lineup against your opponent, okay, running backs, push, wide receivers, push, defense, push. Like, where is the one place where there's like a big advantage here? It's like, Drew Brees is much better than Jimmy G. And I just think that's what it comes down to.
See, I wouldn't go push on the defense. I know New Orleans defense has been better this year, but I would take the Niners as a win in that category.
And I'll just say this. The Saints have already lost one game at home this season to their hated division rival. I don't expect them to lose anymore. Quick, when the injury hits for the Saints, Kiko Alonso is day-to-day after leaving last Thursday's game with a thigh injury. Zach Line shows up as questionable along with Teron Armstead. They did re-sign Manti Te'o for the rest of the season because of other hits to the linebacking core that are not listed here.
Plus, he got a call from his girlfriend to come back to New Orleans.
Too soon, Jay. Too soon.
Billie Eilish doesn't know that joke either.
Oh, gosh. For the Niners, we have Dee Ford, Joe Staley, Matt Breida, and Dante Pettis, who's doubtful. The other three showing as questionable. Richard Sherman is questionable. He's day-to-day after suffering a knee sprain during the loss of the Ravens. And defensive tackle DJ Jones has an ankle injury. He's also questionable.
All right, it's time to move to the 4 o'clock games. And we begin with the Los Angeles Chargers, 4-8, Jacksonville Jaguars, 4-8. The Chargers 23rd, the Jaguars 25th. Chargers favored by 3 points on the road.
Why?
Going to the East Coast. It's a 4 o'clock kickoff, though. Can we say that the Chargers have given up, or they're just not as good as they look on paper? I don't know. Either way, Minshew Mania returns. Gardner Minshew, making his first start since week 9, passed for 147 yards and a touchdown. Last week, in replacement of Nick Foles, he has 5 touchdowns, only 1 interception in 3 career home starts in Jacksonville. Leads rookies, by the way, in passer rating, 91.1 with a minimum of 100 attempts. Ranks second in passing yards, 2,432, and tied for second in touchdown passes with 14. What do the Jaguars do with Nick Foles? We're all taking the Jaguars, but I think it's more important to talk about the fact that Nick Foles could possibly become the quarterback for the Chargers next year.
Actually, not a terrible idea.
Earlier this week, well, someone said to me earlier this week, Nick Foles only looks good in an Eagles uniform, and every other place that he's played in, he's been horrible. So take from that what you will. I don't think he comes back to Philly considering the contract he just signed.
I mean, are we seeing the end of Phillip Rivers, Nick?
That's the thing, is I think that's why it's actually a smart comment that I hadn't thought of, is just because Phillip Rivers' contract is up at the end of this year, and he has played terribly. He also doesn't want to really move with the team. He's kept commuting from San Diego to L.A. He didn't want to move his family. There's talk that the Chargers might end up somewhere other than L.A. at some point in the near future. But they've just straight up zero succession planned for him in place. They have Tyrod Taylor on the roster. They don't have any young guys. I guess they're going to be picking high in the draft. Probably not high enough to pick a top 5 quarterback. I mean, who knows? But I actually think, so Nick Foles might be a decent bridge for them if they decide to move on from Rivers, which it sounds like is kind of likely, because I kind of feel like they want to move. Rivers saying, I'm retiring. And either way, it's not a question of, do you cut him or do you bring him back? It's, do you give this guy a market level deal when he's clearly declined? I mean, he's fallen off of that Peyton Manning cliff when it comes to performance. Like, you look at, you compare his stats to Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones looks better this year. I mean, that is the level that Phillip Rivers has been playing. Yeah. And
true.
So, yeah. And on the Jags side, I mean, it actually just it annoys me, because I feel like if the Jags hadn't stubbornly decided to force Nick Foles onto the field, even after the first game where he didn't play particularly well, and they kept with it for a couple more games, if they hadn't done that and they just let Minshew play, they'd be in the playoffs, at least a playoff discussion right now. I mean, I think there's no way that they wouldn't be outside of the wild card discussion. But instead, they chased their sunk cost, and that sunk cost being the big contract they gave to Foles, which they didn't need to after trading for him, because, they were competing with absolutely nobody. I mean, it was widely reported they did it just so that he would have, respect in the locker room. Like, well, great, good job. Everyone's wearing the Minshew mustaches. Everyone wants him to play. He's clearly the better player than Nick Foles right now, and you owe Nick Foles a ton of money. So, yeah, I mean, I think they screwed themselves out of the playoffs by not recognizing that sooner. And, look, you can't be chasing that sunk cost anymore. If you want to actually win games, which, they were in the AFC Championship game 2 years ago, you got to start just being aggressive and making the right decisions, not following the money.
I mean, perhaps the Jaguars look at a coaching change. What about the Chargers, James? I mean, there were high expectations for the Chargers. There usually are. But, this year in particular, they were the paper champions of the AFC West.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate, because I pretty much went against everyone's mindset.
You did.
Of them.
You were the one that said, "No, they're always the paper champions this time of year." You were the one that was speaking the truth.
I do it every single season. And last year was the outlier. They competed. They pretty much lost a division off tiebreaker. That's the only reason. They had the same record as the Chiefs and end up being the 5th seed because of tiebreaker. But, I mean, I look at the squad, and year in and year out, I think even going back to when they had players like Merriman and Tomlinson with Phillip Rivers out there and, you know, stacked roster of talent. They were always, well, this is the best roster in the NFL on paper. And they were the best roster in the NFL on paper. They have never lived up to expectations as long as Phillip Rivers has been quarterback, and they never will as long as he's quarterback. And not to say that he's the sole purpose of that, but he's the only constant year in and year out for this squad and the way they underperform year in and year out. And this year just happens to be his worst year of his career. And it's even marred so even more if you watch them play any game. Just look at them on offense. Forget defensively, because I do think there's enough talent on that defense where you can turn the corner and they could bounce back. Len is a defensive-minded head coach. He'll get that fixed. On offense, though, when I watch these guys play, there is no rhyme or reason 9 times out of 10 for Phillip Rivers to audible some of the plays that come in. Or the decision-making. The decision-making is porous. They had a 3rd and 5 this past Sunday, and I mentioned this on the recap show. A 3rd and 5, and Phillip Rivers takes the snap from shotgun and immediately throws it to Austin Eckler in the flat, who lined up beside him in the shotgun. 2 linebackers ran with Eckler on the play, so why is that your first read? He didn't even bother to look at anyone else, and he changed the call at the line of scrimmage. So I don't know what he thought he saw, but whatever the matchup was he thought he had was not there with Eckler being double covered by 2 linebackers. He never even got close to the line of scrimmage. And matter of fact, I think it was like a 4-yard loss because of them being in shotgun.
By the way, I had asked the question, and ESPN came right with the answer. Eric D. Williams says Anthony Lynn not on the hot seat. His seat is pretty cool. However, Doug Marone's seat is very, very hot. Not even warm. It is only just warm. I take that back. Wait, where are they?
He's not on the hot seat. He's just warm.
Where did the Jack go? No, he is on the hot seat. According to Michael DeRocco, he is squarely on the hot seat. Yeah,
it's hot in Florida.
It's interesting. Only way Marone could save his job would be to go 4-0 and have Gardner Minshew play well, but that may not be enough. That's according to Michael DeRocco, ESPN.com.
That's not going to be enough. They've lost too much talent over the last couple of years, because even when they went to that conference title game, everyone was like, all right, well, if they just get a better quarterback, they would have beaten the Patriots. And they stuck with whoever it was at quarter. Bortles, thank you. They stuck with Bortles. And the next year turned into a flat-out disaster. And I think that began a lot of the disgruntledness because of the way that defense was playing previously to last season, where they basically fell off a cliff themselves. And a lot of the star players on that defense were just not happy because the offense wasn't producing at the same level it was the year before. Hence why you get players leaving in free agency and Jalen Ramsey forcing his way out via trade. So, yes, something stinks in Jacksonville. Probably the head coach needs to go, and they need to make sweeping changes. For the Chargers, I think Lynn, I agree, is fine, because I think this is, his 2nd or 3rd year coaching the Chargers.
Third it's his first bad season after playoff season. Yeah,
after playoff, and again, 12-4 last year in his 2nd season coaching. I think that had more to do with, dare I say, the schedule that they played and the defense. I don't think it had anything to do with Phillip Rivers. But they're losing right now because of Phillip Rivers. I will say that much. Not entirely because of him, but, I mean, there are some discipline issues on defense, because to lose the game the way they did this past Sunday was crazy.
By the way, I haven't been doing the weather report. I don't think there's been any weather issues. I don't think there are any weather issues this week. But,
no.
I can go back and check for teams that we missed. All right. The Tennessee Titans.
There are no big injuries here.
Good. Tennessee Titans 7-5. Oakland Raiders 6-6. Titans are 11th in the power rankings. The Raiders 17th. Titans favored by 2.5 in this particular game. The Titans' .4